on the sub notes. You guys are funny. Okay. We left off discussing how blood heals in a wound and how a wound gets fixed. So platelets come, the vessel constricts, vasoconstriction, because the wound does not want to bleed out. We want to keep the blood in the body. And so the first thing that's going to happen is the vessel is going to constrict to prevent blood flow to the area. And then the platelets are going to come and block the wound. And then we're on step number 3. When the vessel ruptures, a complex cascade of chemicals come to that area. And then we have prothrombin activator. And this is a substance that is coming to this area that is telling the body we need to form, basically it's a scab in this section. It has all these fibers that are going to form to catch the platelets and also help to form a clot with the erythrocytes as well. So platelets start it and make it kind of sticky. You have the fibers that are making kind of a network, but then you're also going to get red blood cells that form in that area also that kind of get caught in this network. The whole point is to plug up that area so more blood does not leak out. Okay, so here is the process again. We have some kind of break and the vessel is going to constrict. You have the sticky platelets. The platelets are represented as blue in this case. I don't know why they chose blue, but they did. They look like little bacterias to me. But they're going to come and they're going to be exposed to the outside, and by being exposed to the outside, that's what makes them sticky. And they form a clot in that area to patch the hole. It also forms the fibrin around that to help catch the erythrocytes as they're going by and patch up that area, the fibrins, and they're going to form that kind of sealant over the break in the vessel. Oops, sorry, went too fast. So the prothrombin activator, calcium is important for that again. It's going to cause thrombin to come in, and this fibrinogen is the fibers that's going to be used to make that network. Here's some more calcium. Again, how important calcium is in the whole process. So we know calcium was important for muscle contraction. Well, calcium is also going to be important for forming of blood cells. Remember that this is a positive feedback loop. So our body doesn't use positive feedback very often, but it is going to use it in when a clot is formed in the body, such as in this case. So one thing builds up, causes another thing to happen, causes another thing to happen, and so on. So it's kind of that snowball effect. So then we have the fibrinogen, which forms the fibrin fibers, and then these cross-linked fibers make that network that is holding everything into place. And this is in Google Classroom. So the prothrombin activator acts as a catalyst, so the catalyst, and turns the prothrombin into thrombin. And so we have our activator, here's your activator, turns it into thrombin, and that's going to get our fibrins going, and that makes the fibers that will make the network that holds everything in place. So this is kind of like the chemical aspect of how everything is activated to tell the body that we need to form the fibers to make this network, to catch everything. So the thrombin acts as an enzyme to convert fibrinogen into fibrin fibers. So enzyme again is going to have multiple purposes, and then it forms the clot. So here are our fibers that have caught the red blood cells, preventing them from escaping and leaking. So remember that this is happening in bruises as well, because a bruise is basically a break in a vessel that has leaked out under the skin. The difference is that the bruise just didn't reach the surface. So you still have some kind of broken vessel. It's just the broken vessel just didn't reach the surface and the tissue has absorbed the blood. So that's basically what a bruise is. You're just bleeding on it in the skin. And it changes color because your body is working on reabsorbing the blood. So people who bruise easily are people who have like weaker capillaries and weaker vessels, or maybe just more leaky capillaries. So those that are on blood thinners, you might see them bleeding more often because their blood can't clot as well. And this is showing the process again, just another way to visualize it, kind of another flow chart. I wanted to give you a couple different flow charts with descriptions so that you can kind of understand it, because this will be a question on the test, is how a blood clot is formed. I'll tell you that right now. This will be a question on the test. How is a blood clot formed? And so I wanted to give you a couple different ways to show the process so that you can have a couple different ways to study it. All right, so the fourth part is the fibrin formed within the blood is gradually dissolved because now you've healed it. So you actually need to do something with the clot that's left. You don't really want to keep that clot around. I mean, that's not going to be good. And the clot's going to go to the heart, or it's going to go to the lungs, or it's going to go to the brain, and that's not exactly what we want. So we need to get rid of that leftover clot. So we want to dissolve it and restore the flow back to the vessels and get rid of the clot. The process of liquefaction, that's a fun word too, or lysis of the fibrin is called fibrinolysis. Fibrinolysis. So now we made the clot. Now we need to get rid of the clot because we don't need it anymore. We healed the vessel. The vessel is now back to normal, and we need to get rid of the clot that we made, and it's all fixed. So let's dissolve the clot before the clot breaks off and travels somewhere it's not supposed to. Why is it still 26 degrees outside? No. So this last step. Maintaining the fluid of the blood or normal capillary flow is really important. Don't want blood clots. What's the point of these tiny bottles? Why make them? There's not even anything in here. No, but it's like you just go through more of them. Yeah. I don't like them. I mean, I got it for free. That's why I got it. All right, so a scab is basically the platelets and fibrins that have dried from the blood clot after coagulation. Protect the damaged area and prevent pathogens from entering the body and decreases blood loss. It'll eventually fall off, and it could leave a scar behind, or, I mean, a lot of times it doesn't. It depends on how severe it is. It depends on if you pick at it. The best thing to do is to just leave the scab alone. But it's platelets and fibrins. It just protects the area and prevents things from getting in so the body can heal. So the fibrous tissue, usually the result of deep tissue damage, this is the scar, and excessive collagen production. Some people and ethnicities are more prone to scarring than others. African Americans are usually more prone to scarring than other ethnicities. They usually get the scars more severely. But if the tissue damage is deep and severe, you're more likely to get scars. Like after my surgery that I had in November, I got scars from that. But that's normal and expected, so. I mean, they're not bad scars, but they're still scars. I was hoping I gave you a video about formation of. Oh wow, that is a very loud video.
Do you remember tripping over as a kid and cutting your knee, and then magically the bleeding suddenly stops? Or have you ever wondered why this happens? Our body is very clever and produces substances to seal off the open wound. In this video, we are going to look at how and why blood clots. Clotting prevents us from bleeding to death and also protects us from nasty disease-causing organisms called pathogens entering our body. When we injure ourselves, we can damage the blood vessels just below our skin. This can cause blood to either leak into our tissue and form a bruise, or if the skin is broken, to openly bleed. To prevent these horrible things happening, blood clotting occurs. So let's have a look at how this happens. Starting with platelets. These are tiny cell fragments that float around in our blood. When a blood vessel is damaged, collagen is exposed. This collagen exposure attracts platelets to the injured area. The platelets then stick together to form a plug. They've quickly built a barrier that stops us from losing too much blood. However, this platelet plug isn't that strong, so it needs to be made stronger. A protein called fibrin does exactly that. In our blood, there are soluble fibrinogen proteins. At a wound, these soluble fibrinogen proteins are exposed to outside chemicals that aren't normally found in blood vessels. Like with the collagen and platelets, this exposure causes the fibrinogen proteins to turn into sticky fibrin fibers. The fibrin fibers form a mesh, holding all the platelets together and making a much stronger clot. More platelets, red blood cells, and other components in our blood all get stuck to the mesh, making it even stronger. This clot stops more blood escaping the body and also prevents nasty pathogens entering our body from the outside. The clot develops into a scab, which protects the wound as it heals, and new layers of skin form underneath. So really, all a scab is just platelets trapped in the fibrin mesh. It is like putting a plug in a sink. When the new skin is fully formed, the scab will fall off, revealing the lovely brand new skin underneath. A final thing to note, remember that I said the exposure to the collagen causes the platelets to stick together, and the exposure to the outside chemicals causes the fibrinogen to turn into sticky fibrin. Both the platelets and the fibrin only become sticky after the exposure. This means in a normal, healthy blood vessel, they won't randomly cause clots. So from this video, you should understand the magic of blood clotting. Platelets are first to the scene, closely followed by the fibrin fibers. Our blood clots so that we don't lose a lot of blood, and don't let lots of nasty pathogens into our body if we cut ourselves.
If you like the video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Comment below.
So I'm not sure, but I see a problem with that system. I'm just thinking out loud. I don't know all of the diseases and disorders, but if there is a disease or disorder that makes them clot inside the vessels and the fibrin and platelets stick together, because if they only get sticky when they're exposed to the outside, what kind of disease or disorder make them sticky inside? Do you see? I wonder if there is something like that.
Isn't that what, well, not specifically with fibrins, but isn't that what osteoporosis is?
Osteoporosis is the
Osteoporosis, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right.
atherosclerosis.
Yeah.
That is the hardening of the vessels, like the vessels getting not stretchy. Like where the plaque builds up inside.
Yes.
That's due to like unhealthy eating. Like you eat unhealthy foods like cholesterol and stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's so much like platelets and fibrins. That's due to other unhealthy things in the blood. I'm thinking, I don't know, I'd have to look it up. If there's like a chemical or something, like a genetic disease that's wrong, that makes the fibers stick together when they're not supposed to. I bet there is. I'd look it up on my iPad, but I don't have my iPad because my iPad's recording. Anyway. Because it's a great system as long as it's only exposed to the outside. But if it ever gets exposed while inside, then the system doesn't work.
Marfan syndrome.
Marfan syndrome. Oh, there we go. Okay. No, don't. Okay, there we go. It was going too far. A bruise. See, I jumped ahead. I jumped too far. Bruise. A bruise is blood leaking from a broken vessel into the surrounding tissue. So the tissue in our body can act as a sponge and soak up the, it acts as an absorbent material and can soak up the blood, but that's what gives it that discolored appearance. Surrounding tissue will eventually reabsorb the blood back into the vessels or break it down or like dispose of it, but it takes a while. And so again, this is why the blood changes color over time. Some medications can cause you to bruise easier, which I also mentioned, so I really just kind of got ahead of myself when I was talking about bruises.
Izzy, what did you say it's called?
Marfan?
Marfan syndrome, yeah. Is that an F or a B? I cannot remember.
F.
Ah.
I know a guy named Marvin.
I talked about it in genetic disorders and biology.
I swear I always get tired in this class.
It's because it's right after lunch and you're sitting in the cozy warm chair.
Yeah.
It doesn't have anything to do with fiber.
I don't. That's what Google said.
This is like everything is stretched, right? I just remember you talking about
I didn't actually read the description. I just said what it popped up first.
All right, we're actually moving on to the respiratory system. We're going to sneak that in here for a little bit. I know, look at us go. Respiratory system isn't terribly complicated because it goes along with the cardiovascular so well. So basically what's happening is you're bringing the air in through the nose and the mouth and taking it down into the lungs so that it can be exchanged, the oxygen can be exchanged at the alveoli level with the capillaries so it can get into the blood. The carbon dioxide is picked up at the capillaries, taken back into the lungs, and then exhaled out. So this process is done mostly by diffusion, going from high to low concentrations, and then the blood of course takes it to the tissue level where exchange happens again, mostly by diffusion, so that the body can meet the demands of our body and the exercise and metabolism that we do. So we know that oxygen is necessary for cellular respiration and carbon dioxide is a waste product of that, and our body needs some carbon dioxide, but really not that much. If we have too much carbon dioxide, it sits around in our blood plasma and actually can change the pH because carbon dioxide becomes acidic when it is mixed with water, and we don't want too much of our blood to be acidic. So we need to get rid of it by breathing it out. And then of course plants take it in, the whole photosynthesis thing. So respiration can be divided into four main events: ventilation, gas exchange, transportation, internal respiration. So ventilation is getting the air into the lungs, gas exchange obviously happening in the lungs, oxygen into the vessels, carbon dioxide out, transporting it to the body, and then internal respiration is exchanging it at the tissue level. But as we learned, does it really get exchanged with the tissues? Do nutrients and gases get exchanged with the actual tissues? Or is it something else? Starts with an I. Interstitial. Interstitial fluid. It doesn't, the capillaries actually exchange the materials with the interstitial fluid, and then the interstitial fluid is what exchange it most of the time with the cells. Sometimes it exchanges it with the actual cells, but a lot of times it exchanges it with the interstitial fluid and then with the cells. And the interstitial fluid acts as a go-between. So gas exchange is the oxygen enters the blood and carbon dioxide leaves. And the regulation of the blood, as I mentioned, when carbon dioxide is mixed with the plasma, which is plasma is mostly water. So when the carbon dioxide gets mixed with the water, it does turn it acidic. think back to when we did biology and we blew bubbles in the pH indicator and it turned it from green to yellow, and then we put the LOD leaf in it and watched to see if it would change color, and that is an indication that blowing our carbon dioxide into that made it change color because we were changing the pH. The respiratory system also helps with our voice production. When we move the air over our vocal cords, our larynx, it's going to give us our speech. Helps us to smell. That's another function. These are all the functions of the system. It helps us to smell. We will hopefully have time to get to systems. When you think about how much time we have left in this semester, we ain't got much time. And we always get to that. We've got a lot of systems left to cover and very little time to do it. And also protection against microorganisms. So when we breathe in, our respiratory system has a lot of cilia. And I mean, we have little nose hairs and things and mucus that are going to try and capture all those little tiny things that are within the air, preventing them from actually making it into our body and removing them before they get into our body. So we have an upper respiratory and a lower respiratory. Again, not an anatomy class. You'd learn this in anatomy, but it is you need to know the basics in order to understand the physiology. So our upper respiratory consists of like the nasal passages and the mouth and like the upper throat. And then the lower respiratory is the lungs and the trachea and the bronchi, so kind of in this area. And the diaphragm is part of that. So you have an upper and a lower. So like if you go to the doctor, it's like, oh, I have an upper respiratory infection, that is more like you have a runny nose. If you have a lower respiratory issue, then that means you have a cough because it's in your chest and you're coughing. So the upper respiratory is again more of the nose and the mouth and also some of the kind of the throat area. So your larynx is also known as your voice box. Guys will have a much thicker, we call them Adam's apples sometimes, because they have a deeper voice, and so theirs is going to be bigger. Anything bigger is usually deeper. Think of a whale and how deep the whale is, that noise they make. Think of like a little songbird and how high-pitched their sound is. So women usually have a smaller larynx because they have a higher-pitched voice. My brother, he sings bass, and I always tease him because his larynx, it pokes out and he's got a really big Adam's apple. And he's skinny and tall, but he sings like really deep down. So he has a really large larynx. But the throat also warms and humidifies the air. If you've ever stepped outside on a cold day and you breathe in, that cold air just kind of hits you and you can feel it, like you can feel your nose hairs freezing sometimes. But you don't want that cold air just going straight into your chest. Your respiratory and your trachea and your bronchi, they're going to try and warm it up first, and your nasal passages are going to try and warm it up first. It also is going to filter and clean the air. You have, like I said, these little cilias on the inside, and they're going to try and filter and clean the air before it gets to your lungs, so you're not like hacking up dirt and stuff. If you've ever been to a really dusty, gross place and then like blow your nose afterwards, you can see just how well your respiratory tract actually cleans things, because you have like black snot. So when you get down to where the gas exchange actually takes place, you have, these are called alveoli. I think they look like bunches of grapes, but this is where the gas actually takes place, like the exchange. It goes from the trachea to the bronchi. There are two bronchi, main ones. They branch off and they look like trees. So you have like the main trunk of the tree, which is the trachea, and that's the ridges that you feel on your throat. And then they branch into the bronchi, and then the bronchi branch, there's a primary, and then there's a secondary, and there's a tertiary. The smallest is the alveolar branches, and then you have the alveoli ducts, or the alveoli sacs, and they are one cell layer thick. If you look at them under a microscope, which we do in anatomy, they're simple squamous epithelium. So simple meaning one layer, squamous meaning flat, epithelium meaning like epithelial tissue. And so they are flattened one cell layer thick. You can't get much thinner. And same thing with the capillaries that surround them. The capillaries are also one cell layer thick. So you have one cell against one cell. The gases really can't be much more closer to each other than a one capillary and a one cell alveoli. They are right next to each other, about as close as you can get, so that the gases can exchange with each other. And the alveoli really are coated in capillaries. They're like covered with them. So any area that has a lot of exchange going on are going to be really coated with capillaries. So your lungs are coated, and also your digestive tract has a huge amount of capillaries going to them. So this is kind of how the branching works. This is just like a little chart that shows the airway branching. Not much branching happening with the trachea, but it definitely branches down by the time you get to the alveoli. You have very, very thin alveoli. And this shows what it looks like and how much capillaries is on the outside. There are two separate blood supplies, the pulmonary circulation and the bronchial circulation. The pulmonary circulation is for the lungs, and then the bronchial circulation is like one's bringing the oxygenated blood and the other's returning the deoxygenated blood. So that way you're trying to get as much oxygen as possible and trying to be as efficient as possible. So you really want a very good efficiency and as much oxygen as possible to the lungs, and picking up that oxygen and then carrying it away back to the heart. Again, it's all about efficiency. Can we get as much oxygen as possible from the lungs? But even still, mammals are not the most efficient breathers. Do you guys know what animal breathes the best? Fish are kind of good, but they're still not the best. Oh, wow. Birds are actually the best. I have to be super careful with my birds at home. And there are so many things, like I used to love burning candles, but I can't burn candles with my birds anymore. And I can't use certain cleaning supplies. We can't use non-stick cooking pans around them because their respiratory systems are so sensitive. Because birds are the most efficient with their respiratory system. They have what are called air sacs, and the air sacs allow the air to flow continuously, like one way through them. Whereas we, well, you'll find out, we always have a little bit of stale air in our lungs. So our lungs don't like collapse in. All right, pulmonary circulation brings deoxygenated blood from the right ventricle. All right, so we've got deoxygenated blood coming from the inferior and superior vena cava, dropping into our right atrium. And then from the right atrium, it's going down into the right ventricle. And from that right ventricle, we're going to the pulmonary valve, or pulmonary arteries. Sorry, well, pulmonary semilinear valve, that's correct. Then to the pulmonary arteries. And it's going directly to the pulmonary circuit, and then it goes to the lungs for oxygen pickup and carbon dioxide drop off. Oxygenated blood returns to the left side, the left atrium, by the pulmonary veins, and it gets dropped off into that left atrium and goes to the left ventricle. From that left ventricle, it goes to the aorta and through the rest of the body. Hopefully you remember this circulation because you're gonna need to describe it for the test. On Friday, you will need to describe the circulation through the body for the test. That will be on there. Just like you will need to describe how the body will clot blood, you will need to describe the detailed circulation. Starting at the right atrium, it will pass through the right tricuspid valve going into the right ventricle, and then so on. You need to describe the passage of blood. Visualize it in your head. If it was me, I'd make like a bulleted list. It goes through this, and then it goes through this. But I'm giving you answers to the test. I'm telling you what's on it. Then you go from the aorta, and it arises from the aorta and provides nourishment to the lungs itself and the bronchial circulation. Bronchial circulation goes from the aorta and provides nourishment to the lungs itself. So just like the heart needs its own separate blood supply. Okay, so the heart needs its own blood supply to nourish the heart. The lungs needs its own blood supply to nourish the lungs. And that's what the bronchial circulation is doing. The bronchial circulation comes from the aorta and goes to the lungs to nourish the lungs. So the lungs cannot get nourishment from just the capillaries that are going to it. It needs a separate circulation to provide nourishment to the lungs itself. And that's what the bronchial circulation is doing. So this would be kind of similar to like the coronary artery and stuff on the heart, where on the outside of the heart, providing nutrient to the heart muscles, the bronchial circulation providing nutrients to the lungs themselves. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and stop here for today. I think this is a good stopping point. We only have a couple minutes left in class. And we made